And that's what people are still seeing today. They're graduating from post-secondary and they're trying to find work, and they either can't or they find work. And I think the whole idea of the midlife crisis is starting to happen earlier and earlier and earlier, because they're realizing that the work that they've worked so hard for, spent so much money in the education system to be qualified for, isn't giving them the feeling that they wanted to have. And so all of a sudden it's void.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Mark Groves podcast. Today's episode is a long time coming, Sarah Swain.
Sure is.
So if you don't follow Sarah Swain on social media, I am Sarah Swain.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I discovered Sarah during the quote-unquote public health experience in Canada, and followed her social media content, marketing content, and I was like, man, this chick is badass. Like, she knows how to take what is your purpose and your passion and lead you through it to actually monetizing it, leaving the job you don't like, all that kind of stuff. And I thought, man, how correlative is this, I hope that's a word, to our relationship to ourselves and our relationship to actually embracing and bringing alive and out into the vulnerable space of the public the thing that we are often afraid of exposing and actually turning it into a living. So, alchemist, Sarah Swain, welcome.
Alchemist, I like that. Thanks for having me.
I mean, you really are an alchemist if you think about it.
It's true. We turn ideas into money, turn life into cool things. I can get behind that word.
Well, for people who are, it starts with a spark, right? It starts with, I would say it often starts with the pain. What would you say?
Accurate. Yeah, I think the pain comes before the spark. At least that was my story. There was a discomfort that started to stir once I realized that there was another way to lead my life. It was like I saw it and then I couldn't unsee it. And I was in the world of corporate 9 to 5 grind, which was more like a 5 to 9 grind.
Right.
I was in airports, hotels, airplanes, more than I was in my own home with my husband. And at some point around 2016, 2017, everything just stopped making sense to me. It became so painful because I couldn't understand how this was the way that I was settling for life. This is how society had created the normalcy of life, what we think about career, how we define success. It stopped making sense. And the fear of going out into the unknown, not knowing what that would look like, not knowing if anything would work, eventually became less than the fear of staying where I was and continuing to live my life in a way that didn't fit. And that was the pain that tipped me into entrepreneurship. I thought, well, nothing can be worse than this. So why not try?
Right.
Why not see if something could actually fly? What's the worst that could happen? I end up right back where I am right now.
For me, a very similar story in that woke up to like wanting to learn more about relationships beyond manipulation and sales. And it was like I had awoken something that I didn't realize was there. You know, I didn't realize that, I didn't even consider entrepreneurship, to be honest, because I grew up in inherited line that I don't know when the last entrepreneur existed. You know, probably at some point before industrial, the mechanization of everything, for sure. You know, people who plowed fields and did all the kinds of things. But man, I remember when I woke up to the idea of like, maybe this isn't what I want to do.
Yeah.
But that's confronting.
It is.
Right? Because it's like, wait, I think if you're born into entrepreneurship, like your families do it, it's kind of like the actual thing you do. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting because my husband was born into entrepreneurship.
And was he like, it's too erratic, I need some stability?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So he had the opposite experience in that regard, because when I said, honey, I have an idea, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do something. He's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know, but I trust myself. And
He's like, that's great. That's good.
That struck such a deep fear in him because he had memories as a child of just being, pushed and pulled by the ups and downs of his parents going through the world of entrepreneurship, that he was terrified that it was going to be like that for us too. So we didn't have the cute story of the husband getting behind the wife in her dreams in the early days.
Yeah.
But I understand why.
Yeah.
So it was tough on both of us from a relationship standpoint in our marriage in those early days of me just uprooting everything in our life. I had a very healthy salary. Everything was stable, but I wasn't happy. And so the only choice for me was to get out and try something, give myself at least an idea of what freedom may taste like.
Yeah.
And there was no looking back at that point. It was, we're just going to figure this out. There's no plan B. I burned the boats. I gave away all of my corporate clothes. I told myself the story that if I'm going to have to go beg for my job back, I'm going to have to do it naked. I literally gave my clothes away.
Your suits and
all
stuff.
Of my beautiful designer clothes, probably thousands of dollars worth of clothes, shoes. I had a shoe collection like no other. And I put them all in garbage bags and walked them down the street to my neighbor's house. She worked for a big insurance company in Edmonton. And I said, here's my size profile. Find some women in your office to take these.
Man, when you're doing that, you're like, I'm not going to let myself go back.
Exactly.
Which is the place that we need to get to at some point. But, I consider when I left pharma, I was single. So I didn't have kids. I didn't have a partner to consider. So I recognize there's different constraints for different people and moving in different directions. And also the idea, like, is my partner going to be supportive of this growth, of this change? But at the end of the day, I kind of consider it's like, we can either stay in the box that we've been in, because it's so symbolic of everything. It's like, okay, here's something that's sparking in you it's like if you say no to it, it's suppression. Oh, wait, you're starting to say yes to it. Where else do you suppress yourself that you need to release the valve on? And in a way, a lot of this, like when I think entrepreneurship is almost as potent of a vehicle of personal growth as interpersonal romantic relationships. And I'm not sure that there's one that's more than another when you're deep in it, but they're both, because starting to charge for what you do is needing to recognize through the charging for what you do, the recognition of your worth.
The worth.
Yeah. I mean, your brand, Monetize Your Mind, is about actually stepping into that. So what do you see as being the greatest fears that people have? Actually, maybe let's start first with, how does someone know that they have something that's desiring to be brought into the world? Like, what is it generally that you see in people who are in this negotiation phase?
I love the word negotiating, because that's what people do. They negotiate with their future. They negotiate with their dreams, their vision. I see it all the time in the world that I work in. What's their experience? I think the common denominator is it's a feeling. It's a feeling that won't go away. So they know that there's something more. They may not have the clarity on what it is. They certainly can't see A to Z execution. And I think that's what scares people is I know that I'm supposed to do this thing, or I have a feeling that I'm supposed to be doing something differently with my life, but I have no idea what that looks like or how to execute it. And because that clarity isn't there, then the action takes the back seat. But we know that that's the only way that clarity actually comes, is if we just start doing something. And I think too, there's a certain amount of programming that's at play as well. We think that we have to figure out the thing that we're going to do as an entrepreneur, and that's somehow going to translate into the thing that we do for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, very similar to choosing a career, right? It's interesting how we have the same lens.
Yes.
Well, if I pick that, now I can't unpick that, like a partner.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like I'm in it and this is it. So I got to get it right from day one.
Here's more of the retirement, like this is till I die or till I retire, no matter what.
No matter what. And that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
I think the entrepreneurs that have the greatest entrepreneurial experience, success can be defined a million ways, but the people who have the best experience are the ones that are willing to change and evolve their business alongside how they themselves change and evolve as a human. And so the idea of knowing the exact thing that you're going to do in your entrepreneurial journey, and that's somehow going to translate to something that is so fixed and static for the rest of your life, it's misleading. And I think it's deterring a lot of people from at least just putting one foot in front of the other and starting something, even if it takes years for them to figure out, oh, well, I tried this and I tried that. I mean, I'm a poster child for trying this and trying that.
Right.
But it's exactly what led me to doing what I do right now. So if I had not have tried all the other things that just piqued my interest, got me a little curious, got me a little excited, felt some alignment clicking into place, had the courage to just act on that feeling like this might be something. This feels good. Let's try it. Some work, some don't. But if I hadn't have tried those things, 6, 7 years into my entrepreneurial journey, I wouldn't have what I have now. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I even ran a publishing house at some point during my entrepreneurial journey. That's
crazy.
That was nowhere in my game plan.
How many books did you publish?
We did, I think 12 or 13 anthologies, so over 100 authors combined.
What a wild segue. You're like, oh, let's just start a publishing house. Oh, that's not what we want to do anymore.
Right.
I like how you said what I do right now, because that language is so
I don't know
important.
what I want to be when I grow up.
Right. That's
I
such
don't.
a cool...
I don't. I have no idea what's coming, but that's what's exciting about it.
I wish I had, had only through the awareness of my experience do I recognize that when I started teaching about relationship, eventually that wouldn't be all I wanted to do. Which, of course, naturally makes sense because when I started as a salesperson at Future Shop, it made sense that eventually I wouldn't want to be at Future Shop selling extended warranties anymore. And then as a pharmaceutical rep, But to think that when I stepped into what was then seen as aligned purpose, right, like a depth of purpose, that purpose would change or change how it looked, which that I wasn't really ready for. It's like I always longed for a classic Bronco. And then when I got one, I didn't want it.
I love those.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. But to me, I was like, oh, this is someone else's dream truck. It's not
Right.
mine anymore. Like I had it for a while and then I sold it. I sold it to someone who it was their dream truck, who was me when I bought it, was the
Right.
same feeling. But I remember having this recognition in the selling of that I need to allow what I dream about to change. I need to allow what I want to desire to change. But when, as much as I know better than, quote unquote, better than this, it's like I didn't know that the formulation of something like Create the Love would also become rooted in my identity,
That's a big conversation.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the evolution of the entrepreneur, if we're not aware of the entanglement of our identity in the work that we do, we can become just as trapped in our dream as we can become in our careers.
Yeah.
Because we start to make ourselves synonymous with the work that we do.
So true, with the validation, with the,
Yes.
And I recognize that from a psychological, personal sense that, like, I remember saying to a friend, like, oh man, I get like this negative comments, blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, if you're going to ignore the negative comments, what are you going to do with the positive ones? And I was like, oh. He's like, you can't be selective. Like,
Yeah.
either be immersed in them or not.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's so true, that it's in a world that and I was talking to Autumn Sky, who is a mutual friend of ours, how so much art doesn't get made anymore because there's the perception that it won't be validated by the approval machines of Instagram or TikTok or whatever, Facebook.
And it's amazing to me that with the ability that we have to create anything, especially in the world of art, music, poetry, writing, how that age-old story of this is not a real career still grips the minds and the hearts of artists and creatives even today. And in the Monetize Your Mind community, we have so many of these people, artists, poets, writers, painters. What is a a pottery person. What's the word for a
Potter, I think, isn't it?
A potter? Potterist? I think it's potter. Yeah,
That's a
you're right.
pothead versus a potter. Those are
Maybe
important
a bit of
distinctors.
both.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
a bit of both.
Yeah, but it's amazing how people still need a huge amount of validation in the things that bring them joy in order to give themselves permission to do something for a living. I don't understand how in 2024, this is still the way that society makes people feel. And there's so much packed in there. There's programming from parents. There's the educational system where, the Bachelor of Arts, what
We used
what
to,
is that?
BFA, we used to say bare fresh ass because that's about how it's useful. I remember in university when our friend was like, I'm a BFA major, we're like, bare fresh ass.
Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What are you
it's
going to
sad.
do with that? Wipe your ass, right?
What are you going to do?
It's like, unless you're an accountant, a doctor, my messaging was accountant, doctor, finance, maybe marketing. You might be able to break the bank with that one. But otherwise, fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what people are still seeing today. They're graduating from post-secondary and they're trying to find work, and they either can't or they find work. And I think the whole idea of the midlife crisis is starting to happen earlier and earlier and earlier because they're realizing that the work that they've worked so hard for, spent so much money in the education system to be qualified for, isn't giving them the feeling that they wanted to have. And so all of a sudden it's void.
Yeah, I think about all the layers of that with identity because you look at, I think we're in both midlife crises that are occurring at 20.
Yeah, mine was in my late 20s.
Mine, yeah, in my late, I think I had another one though because I bought a red convertible, so that's about as typical as it gets. I didn't get divorced though, but I think when I look now, I see this. There is certainly a crisis of identity going on in young people.
Yeah.
And there's many layers to that. But I really think at its essence is a crisis of purpose and a crisis of meaning.
Yeah.
And a crisis of, like, you can go try on any identity you want, but at the end of the day, you'll always be who you are. So it's really like seeking to find ourselves. And again, I have so much compassion to the complexity of my statement being received by people who maybe struggle with all of those things. But at the end of the day, it's like, as you said, we are in this, there's a clashing of systems, which is you're told that if you go get a bachelor's, a master's degree, you're going to have these types of jobs that you're qualified for. And then you're going to work in a system where the capitalization, the like maximum you can ever make, is limited by the salary spaces, bracket, sorry, of what the industries say is your rifle bracket, which will at this point not keep up to inflation for many reasons. We can thank Justin Trudeau. But but when you're an entrepreneur, to me it is a form of revolution because it's a revolution of one, you're saying I'm going to be in the system, but I'm actually going to figure out how to monetize this so I can leave the system. And Corey George, I love how he said, like, you can be as mad as you want at money and at systems, but no one will hear you from the bottom.
It's true.
He said something like that. But I think I agree with that. Like, money itself is neither moral or immoral. It is amoral. It doesn't have a morality to it. It's the people who use the money and how you use money. And so it's like, why wouldn't we figure out how to do exactly what we fucking love?
I know.
Which, like, of course, we can get into all the conspiracies of like why education doesn't teach that. Education doesn't teach relationships. No. Education doesn't teach a lot of shit. Education is starting to teach some weird shit.
Very.
But with all that, it doesn't teach liberation because it's not interested in your liberation.
No, it's interested in you being a worker and a taxpayer. And the conversation around money, I know, I've seen it time and time again. This is something that I have to work with my clients through over and over and over again, is this hatred of money, whether it's conscious or subconscious. It's like a repellent anything they can do to push it away from them, whether they realize they're doing it or not. And it's because we're not raised and we're not taught to understand how to actually win in a capitalist society.
Right.
And so the blanket statement is capitalism is bad. But wouldn't capitalism be great if people understood how to leverage it? The people who are at the top know how to leverage capitalism.
They're masters. They're chess masters.
They're masters at it. That's why they have the wealth that they do. What people don't want to realize, though, is that we all have the opportunity to do the same in a capitalist society. We just don't know how. And so if we can figure out the how, then ideally more people begin to win financially, instead of just assuming that the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer, and I'm on the receiving end of a crappy financial situation, and this is just what I'm doomed for the rest of time. What if you had the tools to know how to create more wealth for yourself? And I'm not an investment specialist by any means. That's not my world, but
The Bitcoin, man. Bitcoin, bro.
did you see it? Like went through the roof today? Something is going on.
Yeah, something to it. I don't know, but like BlackRock and a bunch of things are going on with it.
Of course.
I bought some like 2 years ago. I put $5,000 in, being like, all right.
You might be a millionaire today.
Then I saw it plummet. No, I bought it. I forget, maybe 38,000 or something. And so I own like a chip of a Bitcoin, but I'm on a men's group. I'm in a men's group, and in the men's group chat, there's a lot of like Bitcoin to the sky, and I just laugh because I'm like, man, I haven't even checked the balance of mine.
You should check it today. I had a bunch of people messaging me saying that it's gone through the roof, but we have tools. There are investment tools that can help you change your financial situation. But at the end of the day, it can be as simple as I have an idea. I'm going to trust myself to do something with it. And I'm going to literally make some magic by turning an idea into money for myself.
Yeah.
Everybody has the ability to do that.
The alchemy.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's that form of revolution.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, we can complain about the system, or we can actually say that we don't like it, but actually use the system to liberate ourselves. Because you're not liberating from yourself from the system by like spending all your time at protests or on TikTok making videos about how oppressive capitalism is. No. And don't get me wrong, I'm not invalidating the people who desire to do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's, if you resent money, you'll never be able to hold it. Yeah. If you hate rich people, you'll never allow yourself to develop some form of wealth.
You'll never be rich.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my friend Selena Gray says money just amplifies who you really are.
Absolutely.
Like,
I totally agree.
Poor people who are pricks and rich people who are pricks, and poor people who are incredible and rich people are incredible. Yes. And it's like, just become the type of person you admire who holds money. And I remember hearing that because, I'd learned just through being exposed to people who were cynical about capitalism as a kid that rich people were bad. And yet I grew up, my father's a researcher, and he studied heart disease. So we were surrounded by cardiologists who made lots of money, and they were all incredible. And deep in my unconscious, there was like a belief that they weren't good people, despite the evidence that they were incredible people.
Right.
Yeah, was it really, when I had to bring it forward, I was like, oh. And my whole life I'd been in debt, would get a bonus, pull myself out of debt, and then go right back
in.
I could never hold it.
Yeah.
And I remember when I spoke to my friend Selena, she was like, of course you can't hold it. Like, if you hold it, you're now bad. I was like,
yeah. That's what's happening, though. So instead of people addressing the relationship with money that they have, healing the wounds around money that they have, they just continue to point at things that they have absolutely little to no control over and hope that it's going to somehow change their situation. And, over the last few years, there has absolutely been a historical level of wealth being transferred into the hands of people who are already very wealthy, which yes, I totally agree. When you are an anti-capitalist and you see something like this happening, I understand.
It's disgusting.
I understand
Right.
the rage.
I get it.
I'm like, yeah.
I'm watching them print money. Everything costs more. They got way more money now.
Yeah.
Like Walmart's open and the mom and pop shops are closed during. Walmart's open, liquor stores are open. All these places, big box stores open during this experience the last 3 years, but the mom and pop shops closed. I'm like, nah, like that didn't make any sense. Yeah. And like Canadians, Americans, wherever that happened, why are you not mad about that?
Well, here's the thing. The solution can't be, let's get really mad about it and then hope that our anger and our protests somehow morally change the wealthy people who don't have good hearts into, oh, the little people down at the bottom
They're
are
mad.
right. We should probably be better humans.
Yeah, we should stop exploiting all the systems that we benefit from because it's not okay.
Wow. Yeah, it's never going to happen. And so
they'll just freeze your bank account.
Just freeze your bank account to throw you in prison. We know that that's not what they're going to do.
No.
And so
it's a tale as old as time.
The only thing that we can do is we, the people who have the big hearts and want to create a better world for our generation, future generations to come. We want to create a better life for ourselves and our families. The only thing that we have any control over is ourselves and what we choose to do. And so I would like to think that it's a correct assumption that if more people with good hearts and good intentions have wealth, then the power imbalance that we have right now in the world of finance and power and government and all these things, it wouldn't have the weight that it does anymore.
No,
and so
you'd be free.
You'd be free. I see the ability to create our own financial wealth as a responsibility. So
speak more to that.
This is, yes, I love the idea of fulfilling your passion and doing work that you love, feeling really fulfilled by the impact that you're having. I'm all for that. And I would also like to see more people challenge themselves who may not have that spark, who may not have that entrepreneurial cell in their body, to just ask themselves, well, what if I did do something? What if I did create something? What if I tried something? What if I built something? What if I tested something? What if I had the ability to bring more money into my household? What would that look like? How could that elevate my life? How could that liberate my family? How could that give us more choice, more freedom, more independence? Instead of looking at how am I going to get through my career if they don't give me the annual pay bump that is supposed to cover inflation. Like we have to start rejecting the thought process behind, I'm going to wait and hope that things get better, or that someone outside of myself, maybe that's an employer, a boss, a company, is going to make me financially better off. We have to start asking the question, how do I take this into my own hands? This doesn't mean that everybody has to go out and quit their jobs, but what if there is a way for you to monetize something for an extra few hours a week, maybe even completely passively, and you're not solely reliant on one stream of income coming from one employer? We have seen firsthand over the last couple of years, the idea of job security is a lie.
Yeah.
And so
especially if it's based on a medical choice.
Especially if it's based on a medical choice. And that really was the wind at my back. I think it was more like a raging fire at my back when I witnessed so many people going through this, particularly here in Canada in 2021, 2022, having to choose between, their moral code and their paycheck. And the reason anybody is ever even in that position to begin with is because they've become solely reliant on their paycheck as far as their ability to provide a livelihood for themselves and their families.
Yeah, that's such a powerful point because it requires holding the complexity that we have not been taught how to liberate ourselves, so we become dependent on one sole provider.
Yes.
Who then, although it's a violation of informed consent, says, if you don't do this thing, we'll take away your money. By the way, you still have a choice. You don't have a choice when it comes to paying your rent, when it comes to putting food on the table, when it comes to your actual safety, your lowest needs in Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice. That's why it's considered a violation of informed consent. And so we can be mindful that that's true and that is a violation. And how do we make sure that never happens to us ever again?
And this is what concerns me, because over the last couple of years, I was talking to Julie Panesi,
Yeah.
former ethics professor at Western University, who lost her
Who
job.
still has ethics.
Who still has ethics.
But the university lost him.
Exactly. But she lost her job for this exact reason. And we were chatting the other day about the reality of, if this were to happen all over again tomorrow, is anyone in any better of a situation than they were in 2020 or 2021, 2022, when things really, really, really heated up?
Yeah.
And I thought about it, and I can count, people in my circle that have made major changes, for sure. My husband and I are definitely those people where we started to look at every single area in our lives that could be compromised or held over our head with some level of coercion if we were to do something or say something or disagree with something that a governing body of some sort says or desires us to be or do. We looked at every one of those areas and said, I'm at risk. What do we need to do about this?
How do we liberate ourselves?
How do we liberate
power
ourselves
dynamic?
in this area of our lives? How do we create more independence in this particular area of our lives? And then we took action on those things. And we're now 3 years into making a lot of changes in our lives. And we still have so much work that still needs to be done. And it just makes me, it makes me wonder, it makes me worry how many people have seen the dire need for us to liberate ourselves, but haven't started even putting anything in motion. And so Julie and I were talking about this, and she did some polls.
Oh, yeah, I saw that in her stories on Instagram.
Yeah. And I worry for people. With the state of the world that we have right now, whether it's personal finances and trying to find a way to monetize your mind, create money out of an idea.
Yeah.
Or if it's just general self-sustainability.
Like really just to expand, because what we're talking about is the more financial stability you have that comes in diverse ways, diversification, the more space you have in your nervous system to also speak more freely.
Yes.
And that also requires having, so we're talking about being both internally and externally resourced. Internally, that I have the tools to be able to recognize when my nervous system is dysregulated and I still can speak truth, I could still critically think on some level, but to be externally resourced by community that says, we got you. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think all of this is because I want to get to the how, because I think that's so important, but also just to point out that there is a reason that there's a collective desire to grow food again.
Yes. Because
look at the food people are eating. Conspiracies or not, who gives a shit? They're filled with hormones, endocrine disruptors. They've got glyphosate. We can argue about the why. It doesn't matter. It's likely lobby-driven, food industry-driven, pharma-driven, all the things we know. And we can argue again. Oh, let's try to get the powerful Monsanto to not do that thing. And maybe the governments will stop poisoning us. And nope. It doesn't matter. That's not how you change it. You grow your own food. You get into community. Mm-hmm. You get to know your farmers. Yes. And you get together with friends and make a farm. Yeah. I always think of like in the war, in World War II, they had, I forget what they were called, like Liberty Gardens, something like that. But they were like the majority of
Like
American
community gardens?
households grew their food in their backyard.
Okay.
It's so that they weren't dependent on different aspects of food production. But that there's a reason that we are desiring this ability to know that we still have sovereignty, right? That we still have this capacity. And that's why I think the call of the soul that says like, hey, you got to get towards this. You got to start speaking this, sharing this, monetizing this. Mm-hmm. It is because we're being pulled intuitively to a place of recognition that if we want to still maintain control over ourselves, autonomy, we have to liberate ourselves. And this is the premise of Kylie and I's book, Liberated Love, which is really using relationship to do that. But it'll be a magnifying. If you're not speaking your truth in your relationship, you certainly as hell ain't doing it on Instagram. So the what you said earlier, the responsibility. I fully agree that there is like, to me, we have an ethical responsibility to actually listen to the call.
Yes.
And I think when we tie it to that level of accountability, then there's something that moves in us a little differently. Like I remember when I was afraid to start filming and recording stuff and writing, and my coach at the time said to me, like, how arrogant of you to believe your gifts are for you. Mm-hmm. Like, they're not for you. They're for the people who need what you have to share. And if you don't share it, you don't help them, all because you're afraid of like a mean comment. Like, it's like, wow, codependency coming out to haunt me, even on social media.
I remember when I first was mulling around ideas because the call was there. I had no clarity on the call. And this was probably a year before I left my job.
This is before you gave your clothes away.
Yes, before I still had my clothes in my closet. I grabbed a bottle of champagne and a glass, and I marched up to my office in my house. And I had all this Bristol board and Post-it notes, Sharpie markers. And I'm like, I'm not coming out of here.
It's like Goodwill Hunting. Just like,
I was like, I'm not coming out of here
beautiful mind.
Until I understand what this is about. And
no, that's cool.
And why I'm doing this, because it was that feeling of like, there's something here and you need to listen to this. But I'm like, but what? What am I supposed to do? I have a career in retail. I'm in retail pharmacy at this point in my career.
Oh, you were on the other side.
I know. I was on the other side.
I was coming in to visit retail pharmacists.
You were coming in. Yeah, you were coming in to talk to the pharmacists.
That's right. We did.
Give them some new ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sat there and I was like, okay, well, I've got some ideas. Here's some skill sets. And this kind of starts into the how. I'll get to that in a minute. But in the middle of the Bristol board, I had this lined Post-it note. I have a picture of this on my phone. And it was like, why? And I can't remember it word for word, but it was along the lines of, if I don't do this, then other women aren't going to know what's possible for them too. And there's the responsibility right there. Mm. And as soon as I saw that,
like younger versions of you. Yeah.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, well, this isn't negotiable for me anymore. I have to figure this out, because I actually did have lineage of entrepreneurship in my bloodline, but it was just never talked about. And the only time I ever heard it talked about was when the store closed and when things were hard and the house had to be sold.
Oh, yeah. So the bad story.
The bad story.
The way it ended, not
all the great stuff that happened while the store was open and thriving, and
the community.
The customers.
Yeah.
So I didn't have anything around me to be the example of what entrepreneurship could look like. At that point, all I had was what I was seeing on some social media. I didn't have the example of the choice of entrepreneurship being a positive thing.
Like a way to liberate yourself.
A way to liberate myself. Yeah, it was, anytime it had been positioned, it was always, oh, that's risky, or bad things happen to entrepreneurs, or it's a really hard lifestyle and it's hard to make a buck, and kind of all of these old stories of why entrepreneurship is dangerous. And so I felt that duty to figure out how to do it and do it as well as I could, so that other people could look and be like, oh, hey, wait a minute. Maybe there's something here for me too. What if I have an idea? She seemed to figure it out. She left her job, figured things out. Maybe I can too. And so I was kind of coming in that era of the tidal wave of the laptop lifestyle, where everyone started to congregate in Bali and all this.
Oh,
I was like,
yeah.
what is this life that these
I
people
went and
are
visited
living?
there during that, and I was at a place called Alchemy. I think it's called Alchemy. It's like a smoothie place in Ubud. And it was like fresh off the heels of Elizabeth Gilbert's book,
yeah.
Eat, Pray, Love. So it was all divorcees talking about their heartbreak and eating smoothie bowls,
Yeah.
talking about spirit.
Sticking it to the man,
Yeah,
not working for the big corporate world anymore. Yeah. So for me, entrepreneurship isn't just something that a person can do for themselves for the sole purpose of liberating themselves. We're literally shifting a tide in the way that people view how they go about creating a livelihood for themselves. And if more people start trusting themselves to actually take an idea and put it into action, do the relentless amount of personal work that comes with all of the mirrors that are going to be shoved in your face when you dare to trust yourself
yeah.
and put yourself out there willingly, knowing that rejection is part of the game, we start having more examples of people who are leading their lives more well, with more choice in their lives. You know, it's been 6 years for me now, 6 or 7 years for me now. I couldn't imagine not living my life this way. Yet there were days when I'd be driving all over Alberta between all of my store visits, and I would have this playlist, and I would just be in dreamland thinking, like, how the hell do I get out of this? Like, what are my options? Where can I work that I have more freedom?
Yeah.
You know, why am I doing this? And it was always the search for, like, well, what job would give me a little bit better of a life? Instead of, what idea do I have? What value can I bring to the table that can be monetized, that will completely change my life? Not just make it a little bit better. Give me maybe 10 hours back in my 60-hour work week. And so being willing to challenge our definition of work, of what it means to create a livelihood, of success, of fulfillment, all of these things that, in my opinion, are a very black and white linear thing that we are taught in this path of getting an education, going out and getting a job, getting benefits, bonus if you have dental, pension,
Right.
you know, paid sick time, vacation time, company car, paid work phone. These are the things that we're taught define whether or not we're winning in life as an adult. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, when we really sit with it, what is that? That was the epiphany I started to have right before I left my job. I'm like, what actually is this 40-hour work week? 9 to 5? As an adult, I have to ask my boss if I can have an afternoon off to go see a doctor.
It's
What are we
wild
doing?
times for that.
Yeah.
You know,
What
and
are
I
we
think
doing?
of young people today are like at this epitome of, I don't want to do any of those things, and I don't want to be under the thumb of corporation, and yet I don't want to work as much either, which I totally understand. But at the same time, I'm also like, some of the most powerful things I learned were from the cold calling, from the grind, from working as a server, from working in sales, selling extended warranties, you know, seeing doctors every day and cold calling them in hallways and trying to get their attention and shifting their, building rapport in as fast as you could, asking for behavior change. Like, these things were all necessary. They all are skill sets that have enabled me today to be much better at what I do.
When I left my job, I tried to run as far away as I could from my job. And it wasn't until a few years in that I realized exactly what you're saying too. The skills that I've been able to bring in to the work that I do now, I owe a lot to the very random career history that I had. I even did cold calling. That was one of my very first jobs. I was selling newspaper subscriptions, managing teams of hundreds of people. And so there was a lot of a lot of darkness for sure in my life when I was in my traditional career because I was empty. I would work more and work more and work more, hoping that I would feel more fulfilled eventually if I just worked harder and got another promotion and another raise. And that hole would be filled temporarily, usually about 3 months.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need another hit.
Yeah.
We got to go for something else. But yeah, all of that to say that there's a place for everything that I did learn in my career in what I do today. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it's like we want to skip the grind. We want to skip the challenge. We want to skip which is, I get why people don't want trauma. Fuck yeah, I understand that. But like, we want to skip all of it. Like, I remember talking to this, I was hiking in Hawaii, and I was there for a training, and I met there was like 3 20-year-olds hiking, and they were in the same caves I was in. And I was talking to one of them, and I was like, oh, what do you do like what, in your life? And she's like, oh, I'm a YouTuber. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I was like, what do you YouTube about? Well, I just influence. And I was like, what do you influence? She's like, well, I'm an influencer. I'm like, okay. Like, what are you influencing people to do? And I remember leaving that conversation being like, I think it's 25% of Gen Z and younger when they're asked what they want to do.
That's what they want to be.
Yeah, is an influencer. I thought that's great because we probably want to create and be paid because we see this sort of bling life for people making 7-figure this, driving a Lambo. I think of what's his name?
Oh, gosh. Ty Lopez,
When he said like, I love my Lamborghinis. You know, he's walking in his garage. Everyone would know if you're like, OG YouTube marketers. He's an OG
He's
YouTube
an
marketer.
OG.
And he'd be like, I love my cars, but you know what I love more than my cars? My books. And then, I mean, it was brilliant the way that he was the first person. It was like an MTV Cribs through how wealthy he was, but how it was about knowledge. It was like, oh man, this guy is slick.
He's slick.
Yeah, he's slick. And those original internet marketers, it's like original email marketers.
Yeah.
They exploited that email, there was so much trust in email. It's just like BuzzFeed, 8 ways to do whatever. I was reading this article the other day about hooks in videos, and negative hooks work better than neutral and positive hooks, but actually positive hooks work the worst.
I believe
which just shows you the negative bias that we have. So, we could talk about all the ways. What are all the detrimental, painful things that can happen if you don't follow your purpose? I'll sum it up. You'll feel empty inside. You'll have anxiety. You'll get depressed. So that's the fast forward.
The pain scale needs to tip.
You'll have
you got to go through it.
Inflammation in your body because you're rejecting yourself. The abandonment you're afraid of and the rejection you're afraid of outside of you. If you are actually all of you, you're living by never actually owning it. Okay, fast forward. Yeah. The end of your life, you're sad because you never actually answered the call. That's the detrimental, negative possibilities. But how? Because what's possible, of course, is the things you can't measure, which is the feeling connected to your work, feeling free, feeling like a sense of expansion in your body because you have more diverse income streams. Mm-hmm. And how that'll affect your relationships, how that'll affect, because you can move more freely through everything when you have that.
Yeah. How
does someone begin to monetize their mind?
I love this question. And I also love the fact that you touched on the need for contrast too. The level of appreciation I have for what I do now, and the fact that I've gone through this process of learning how to monetize my mind and just this is just what I do for a living now.
Same. It's non-negotiable.
No, there's no going back. Like I will find a way out of no way, go through a brick wall with my face if I need to. It's just there's no other option. But the appreciation I have, I believe, is so much deeper because I have the contrast of what it feels like to be in that painful void of not feeling fulfilled and feeling trapped in a career and feeling like I was at the mercy of society's definition of how you create a livelihood. And so on the other side of that, the appreciation, the gratitude, that's big. Yeah. So yeah, we got to go through, I think everybody needs to go through some stuff before they start winning.
Yeah.
Because then the win feels so much better. Okay, so how do people monetize their mind? We're taught in society that we trade our time for money. And that's pounded into us when it comes to how salaries or hourly wages are set up in traditional job roles. And so, especially for people who are coming out of the workforce, that's a paradigm shift that can be really difficult to break through, because we have been conditioned to believe that 1 hour of my time is worth this. And in order for someone to see me as worth paying for, I need to give them X number of hours of my time, and then they will pay me X amount of dollars.
Right.
The paradigm shift we have to make is, instead of trading our time for money, how do we provide value in a way that enables us to create money? So how do we provide value? When I was leaving my job, or on the verge of leaving my job, when I was in my office surrounded by Post-it notes and Sharpie markers, like, the mad meme that you see, and they're just like frantically scribbling. So I'm like, what is it? I took an inventory of everything that I had to bring to the table. Anything from things that just simply made me happy when I do them, to things that I had tangible work experience for, evidence of success with, really drawing on my career history of, well, I really like these components of my job. I loved leadership. I loved team building. I loved helping managers in my region set themselves up for success and work towards achieving something. So I started to see patterns forming on my Post-it notes. And that was the first step, was what is the value I have to bring to my life? In a world where we're taught to write a resume that is very specific for the scope of work that you are actually applying for in that specific job role. You're like, what
More
are the skills
like
that
fitting in a box?
Yeah, and you take all of you and you squeeze it into this bullet point list of 5 skills or certifications or qualifications, and then you think, God, I hope this is good enough for them, and then I hope I get the job. What if we, instead of applying for a single job, we looked at, we're applying for the best life we could possibly have? What's everything that counts now? What can we throw into the mix? So if we had to make a resume for life, I call it, what would you put on that? And so it starts with extracting what you already have within you. And this is in the context of how I support entrepreneurs. There's a million other ways you can go out and develop new skill sets and go learn more things and become better at something and then go do it. I get that. This is for the people who are sitting in their life right now thinking, what could I possibly do to create more income in my life, or to bring another stream of income, whatever that looks like? What do I have to offer? If you actually sit with yourself and you really take an inventory of everything that you bring to the table in your work, in your relationships, in how you make people feel, and you start to pay attention to what lights other people up about you, you start to pay attention to where you are constantly being complimented for something, and you actually take the time to intentionally sit and do this exercise, you'll start to see a pattern emerge. But what typically gets in the way? Self-worth. Am I good enough? Could I actually do something with this? Why would anyone want to pay me? What could I possibly do? And so simultaneously, as you do this exercise, you're probably going to notice those things coming in. The responsibility at that point is to understand, just get curious around what is that about? Why do I hold this belief about myself? Why don't I think that I can do this when I have evidence all around, especially now, 2024? All you got to do is open up a social media app and you'll see an entrepreneur. We know that it works. We know that it's possible. There's millions and millions of people worldwide out there creating their own livelihood. Why don't you believe that you can have that for yourself? So typically that's where people get stuck is, well, I don't know what I have to offer. I don't know what I could do. I only have X amount of education. I only have X amount of workforce, or whatever it is. Get curious about why you're blocking the possibility. Otherwise, the rest of the how is less likely to happen. If you can get past that and actually be like, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't really know how I'm going to do this. I read a book. Gosh, what was the book? It said the how, you just got to know the what. You don't need to know the how. That's up to God. And it's true. You just need to know what it is that you're going to run forward with. The how, step by step, will reveal itself as it comes. You know, the Indiana Jones scene when he steps out into this abyss.
Yeah, the Holy Grail.
Yeah. And there's no path there. And he's like, man, I hope it appears when I come. That's basically entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
In a
I
nutshell.
agree.
For the rest of our lives.
Yeah, it's being able to be in that unknown.
Yeah.
Which is where all of new life is created. All of, I think it's Tony Robbins who talks about how we have the need for certainty and the need for uncertainty.
Yeah.
But of course, if uncertainty has bitten us in the ass, or we've lost someone suddenly, or someone's left us unexpectedly, relationally, traumas have occurred that we couldn't control.
Yeah.
Then uncertainty becomes paralysis, right? It's like, I want to control everything in my life because that way I can try to predict with the best possible percentage the likelihood that my life will never go awry,
right,
or something bad will never happen to me. But you can never control or predict life to 100% certainty, which of course the universe will remind you of the moment you try to do that. But also your body is in such an insane state of fight.
Yeah.
That you're never.
Yeah.
And so there is some sort of like when I left pharma and stepped into, I left a salary, I left golden handcuffs, quote unquote. I was with the same company for 13 years. I really grew up in a lot of ways at that company, and I'm so grateful for it. And I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to make the same amount of money. I have no idea. And I remember saying to a friend, I need to get rid of my apartment and move in with some UBC students in Vancouver. Like get a room. Like, this is what I'm willing to do. And he was like, this is my buddy Dan Harrison. And he's like, why don't you just make more money? And I was like, that's actually a much better idea. He's like, why would you already be giving away your apartment?
That's our default.
Right. I was like, well, I'm clearly not going to go. It's not going to go well.
It's clearly not going to work.
Yeah, right?
I'm clearly going to fail.
I think in the first year, so my salary total comp at pharma was about 160 grand Canadian.
Yeah.
In my first year, I probably made about 85, 100 grand. In my second year, I made 180. And in my third year, 250 or something. Yeah. And it was like crazy to see that it only took me a year.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I'd been preparing for the exit, much I'm sure like you did on some level.
Oh, I did nothing.
Oh, you just fucking burned it all.
Oh, yeah.
See, I was like, I had the
you
advice.
You were responsible.
I had the advice from Lisa Nichols, who said to me that use the job you have as the investor in the job you want.
Yeah, I learned that after.
Yeah. Hey, listen, sometimes burning the boat is actually what's required. It's like when, I'll work with some people and they just right away they burn their everything to the ground. But for other people, it actually requires a little more somatic space, a little more nervous system space to actually feel safer to take the leap. And that's why both stories are romantic. That's the beautiful thing.
Yeah.
They're both revolutionary. They're both all of the things,
It comes down to how safe do you feel making that decision? Because for me, I am the type of person where as soon as my back's against the wall, the output that I have is like no other. So that is actually where I felt safest, was just be like, I can't give myself another choice because I know how I perform when I don't have another choice. Whereas other people who were like, I maybe don't want to traumatize myself by just all of a sudden not having a paycheck, nothing to fall back on. The central nervous system can actually go through
what you're saying,
trauma.
Yes.
And then if
it's re-traumatizing, and then they become immobilized.
You become immobilized.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed people go through this where all of a sudden the fight or flight kicks in so hard that they become completely paralyzed by the fear. Their central nervous system has gone into such a state that in order for them to, sit down in their home office and be creative, that's not happening because now they're in survival. And so I think it depends what do you actually need to make you feel safe? Because if I had to give myself all this time and runway and room, I just said, oh, I'll just kind of work on things on the side, I would have never kicked into high gear.
Yeah, as you say that, I reflect a lot on my own experience. You know, you and I were talking a couple weeks ago, and for you listening, she is my Yoda when it comes to marketing, branding, strategy, everything. She will push my head through the wall that she walks through as well. It's like the Kool-Aid man, you know, and you have to be a certain age to get that. And if you haven't, Google it, because it's actually a wildly odd marketing campaign.
We remember it.
Oh, yeah.
It worked.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But what's interesting is when I thought I might get kicked off Instagram in 2021, 2022 for sharing actual truth, that I was, just for reference, was right about everything I said, which I don't say that egoically, but rather that, hey, sometimes the common narrative is actually wrong and what they're enforcing is actually wrong. And what do you do when the law is unethical? What's ethics? That's a good question. That's for another podcast. But I remember feeling a sense of relief. If they had kicked me off, I'm like, oh, do it. I dare you. And of course, I didn't actually say that to anyone because they probably would have kicked me off. But there was an idea of like, what you'll light in me is something that will be unstoppable.
Yeah.
And the other day when Instagram was down, I was like, I actually felt in a way a little bit of a sense of relief.
Yes.
That, oh, maybe like I don't have account. It wasn't a rational thought because there's no reason I wouldn't still have an account, because it's not like I'm saying some crazy weird shit that deserves to like things 5G causes blah, 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 right? Like I'm not going to these camps because I don't live in those camps, but I'm like, there was still a sense of like, this would make it so I don't direct my energy to that and I could direct it towards, and so, you know, you and I are working on what direction is for me, and that's why I want to be transparent with the people listening, is like there's something in there that I've been navigating publicly that like, oh, there's a dynamic here that if I wasn't mature, and I'm not justifying, but if I wasn't mature, I would just be done with it and not explore it. But there's a desire to explore it because I'm like, how is it possible to relate to these platforms in a way that is actually powerful? Because the way they relate to people, if we're not in discernment and choice, is we are powerless. So I'm like, is it actually possible? I don't know the answer yet. We'll keep playing with this. But yeah, what do you think about that?
I think it's a huge reason why people are now shying away from entrepreneurship. So the old reason why people didn't want to get into entrepreneurship is like, I can't see myself knocking on doors and selling vacuum cleaners or subscriptions.
I almost did that. Yeah. The vacuums.
I sold magazine subscriptions.
I knew guys, I sold long distance plan subscriptions.
Wow.
Cell phones.
Really
I made
ourselves.
A lot of money from cell phone sales.
Cell phones.
I used to have a pager, okay? Like,
that's amazing.
Shit, I look back and I'm so grateful that I experienced life without technology.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who was it? Was it Rich Roll? A clip the other day was talking about like, we are the last living generation that knows what life is like without the internet.
Which is interesting because it's very similar to like, if you eventually, the historians die and the people die that know different, then we don't know that there is another way.
Yeah.
But that again comes back to like the people moving the chess pieces.
Yes.
Which is why it's important that we step into financial sovereignty.
Yeah. But if the conversation you're having though about social media and our relationship with that, I think that's the new version of knocking on doors as an entrepreneur and why people don't want to go there.
Well, yeah, I said to you, is this just the cold calling of like the 90s?
Yeah.
You know, which I'm like, that actually was, my LinkedIn has a ton of cold callers. They fucking annoy me so much.
That is LinkedIn.
And I'm also like, hey, I recognize the hustle, right? And I just say, sorry, no thank you, goodbye, no thank you. I need an automated thing whenever I get offered anything. But I really do think it's like, is this just part of what I was part of? But, you know, I think of any other, when I wanted to learn how to be good at public speaking, I studied public speaking. And I became fucking good at it because I studied it and I practiced and I still practice. and it's like reps, you know? But then when it came to short form video content, I was like, I don't want to have to, but it's actually the same
Dan.
thing. It's an art.
It's an art. It's a new skill.
And it's like when people didn't want to use email, and then all the email marketers made all the money. And then like when people didn't want to use the fax machine, which that's fucked up.
We're seeing that now with AI, people that don't want to use AI. And it's just one thing after another, which I think is a deterrent for a lot of people when it comes to like, do I want to do a business? Because is that going to mean I have to do the whole social media thing? Am I gonna
What is the answer to that?
Well, I think it comes back to figuring out whether or not that actually is something you genuinely don't want to do, or is it because you're scared? Is there a fear of being seen? Is there a fear of putting yourself on display? Is there a fear of rejection? Is there a fear of embarrassment if you put yourself out there in a public way and it doesn't work? You have somebody from your past that's just watching, waiting for you to face plant. We all have those people. So I think people have to really discern whether or not it's like, maybe social media just genuinely isn't the approach that I need to have for my business, because it's not conducive to how I want to communicate with my target market, which is fine because business existed before social media. And people can still kick it old school in that regard if they want to run a business. That's entirely their choice.
That's true. It especially makes a difference if you're like a local business
Absolutely.
that's a brick and mortar that can do it through word of mouth, and can do it through community events. Can also have a social media that's not derived around political positions and all this fucking stuff, right?
Yes. And that's what people worry about. They're like, do I have to do all of that?
Well, if you don't have one, you don't have to do shit. That's the nice thing. Like my brother-in-law doesn't have social media. I don't even want to say his name because he gets to have so much anonymity. And then in a way, I'm like,
that's beautiful.
Fuck yeah. You know, like there is something I'm playing with even in this conversation that I'm like, man, if I just burnt that bitch to the ground and directed my energy to solely the podcast, solely creation on YouTube, etc., there's a real freeing feeling I have.
There is.
So as you're listening to this, there's something in me that's like, I think of Carolyn Mace, where she talks about when she got called to be a medical healer, a medical intuitive. She drove into the forest in her Subaru, makes sense. And she was like, okay,
here we go.
And there's an element of that, of like, I did it with pharma.
Yeah.
Like maybe this is the next leap.
And maybe it's the next evolution of digital entrepreneurship, is someone showing that it can be done without being in a codependent relationship with your social media platform.
Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, and the curse of it is that my financial stability was not diversified.
Right.
So that was ultimately, if it had been more diversified, which is a lesson I've learned in hindsight, it wouldn't have been as impactful on my own body and system to speak about relevant and important things, which is what I see a lot of. And this is no insult to you if you're listening, but like what I see a lot of therapists and mental health professionals struggle with is they don't want to speak out about things like gender or about lockdowns or about a lot of these things.
Even though there's a direct impact on mental health with each of these things, which is their industry.
There is a ethical responsibility to say this is causing harm, and there is no evidence to support that lockdowns are effective. There is none, and that's not speculation. That's a fact.
Yeah.
And so I look at that and I think, well, if you are worried that your job is going to be lost and your income is going to be taken from you, then we're in the same place that we are talking about starting from.
Yeah.
You know, you're under the same thumb of someone else. And then it really brings up our survival to like need to belong, you know, and I get that. That's why I'm not insulting anybody. Look, everybody makes the decision that they're capable of based on the level of safety that they have psychologically.
And that's exactly where
that's why it's not judgment.
That's why it comes into play, because you do look at even the world of entrepreneurs, self-employed therapists, maybe they have their own private practices. no different than us being tied to one stream of income in the workforce. One job, if I don't comply with what this one job asks of me, from job requirements to mandates to policies to whatever, then I'm going to lose that stream of income. It's the same lack of safety that an entrepreneur feels when it comes to, if I don't manage my account properly, if I don't say the things that are of popular narrative, then if I'm not diversified financially in my business, it's the same thing.
It's the exact same thing. And that's why I don't mean it with judgment. I mean it with context and understanding.
Absolutely.
Of like, we need to then diversify how our ability to be stable and have a self, because I consider that a lot of, why people have remained silent. I have a friend who's an actor who told me recently, because I had done a poll on my stories, like, do you feel like you truly share what you truly feel about some of the most triggering ideological conversations? And the majority of people, again, said no. I think it was 67%, which was, I would imagine, it's probably higher than that a little bit. And he replied to me and said, we now have to sign contracts that we will not share our political perspectives on things, which of course I would imagine comes back to what's going on in East. That shall not be named, for it will be censored. And I'm like, man, this threatens free speech, which is, of course, in my opinion, a fundamental human right and a necessary one for healthy families, healthy cultures, healthy countries.
Well, everything we're talking about right now is exactly the experience of Jordan Peterson. When we think about the only reason why he has been able to be as outward with his views, whether people agree with him or not, needs to be irrelevant in the context of this discussion, because the point is he can, because he's financially stable enough, because he has diversified his income.
Yeah, like he's not impacted by losing his license.
No, he's fighting for his license out of principle, not because he needs
not necessity
his job, right? And so I think that the liberation of yourself financially also ties into the liberation of your voice.
Yeah.
When you don't have to fear that you're going to lose something by speaking your mind about something, when it goes against the popular narrative, when you don't have to worry about that because you're financially free. It's like, well, if this one blows up on me, well, I always have that one over there. Don't you think more people would be speaking up about what's going on if everything wasn't tied to one stream of income? The threat that people have, even still today. I don't know how many active mandates are still in the workplace right now. I hear different stories here and there.
BC and Ontario, yeah. BC still has
BC's government, I think. Ontario just says, oh, we'll just leave it up to the hospitals.
Yeah. Yeah, BC is a provincial.
Yeah.
Which is bananas. That's not based on science.
It's wild. But it comes down to, do you feel safe enough to make a decision that's going to be the best for you and your family? Do you feel safe enough to be able to use your voice? If the answer is no, I'm going to bet that in a lot of cases, it's going to come back to a fear of not having the financial resources you need to be able to support yourself and your family, should you choose to make the choice or say the thing that's right for you. It's all coming back to, do you have enough sources of income for you to be able to be liberated in your life? And so no different than anybody in the workforce. The same goes for entrepreneurs. We have to diversify. And an example of that for me in 2020, events were shut down.
Yeah. I mean, that was a large part of my work too.
Same. Yeah. And I had a huge event that was happening in Canmore, and I'm watching March, April, May, and I think my event was in September. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to host this event. And that was a large revenue stream for me at the time in my business. Thank God it wasn't my only one. And so I was able to be like, okay, pivot, more focus over here. And so it's not just people in the workforce that need to look at diversification. It's entrepreneurs too. We have to. We don't have a choice in this world. And so it's just creatively speaking, what else can you bring to the table?
Yeah, it seems like if your answer is no, that you don't feel safe to share what you really want to share, then you have to create the circumstances that allow that. And I think if that's relational too, because there's not the psychological safety, within a couple, within a family, within a community. I see that a lot in school systems today, is like people get so reactive that then we pivot around the people with the lowest capacity for difference, which if you're pivoting around the people who have the lowest capacity, then that means that society operates based on their capacity for difference. Well, I hate to tell you, but the loudest people who have the lowest capacity are not the most regulated people. They're not even the most mindful people. They're usually the most traumatized, and they're usually the people who are trying to control the level of dialogue because the dialogue is uncomfortable. So the real question becomes, how do we actually create the thing that we're talking about? We have all these different dynamics and systems and government and media and social media and all the different things that at the end of the day, the frictions that we have with them are saying, hey, we need to change something for ourselves. We have to take responsibility and actually create the circumstances that allow us flexibility. So what is the process that you walk people through?
You want to step by step?
Yeah, let's do step. People like step by step for everybody.
Step by step. Get a notebook, pen. It actually is way more simple than people realize. And that's what I love to help, especially new entrepreneurs, understand, is that it really is just about having execution in a series of fundamentals that you can always refer back to at any point in your entrepreneurial journey. Once you understand the fundamentals of how to take an idea and monetize it, it's like riding a bicycle. You can apply it to a product, a service, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. These are the fundamentals. They're building blocks. We all need to have them. So this isn't about bells and whistles. It's not about how do you execute the latest, greatest marketing hack, or how do you learn all the tips and tricks about social media? It has really nothing to do with any of those things, and just helping people understand what are the fundamentals that need to be understood and executed in order to create a new stream of income. So here they are. Number one, understanding who your ideal client actually is. So how do we do that? It really does come down to a simple question that you ask yourself. What is the problem that you help people solve? So this can be applicable to a service or a product, doesn't really matter. Even with product-based businesses, people are surprised to know that people are purchasing their product because they're experiencing a problem. Even if it's something as simple as, I don't have a gift to give someone, you're solving the problem of them not knowing what to buy someone for a gift. So when I say, what's the problem you help somebody solve, it's not about having this catastrophic thing that you're helping people navigate. It may be, depending on the service that you're providing, but it doesn't have to be. So understanding the problem that you help people solve is the first step. The next step is asking yourself, if this is the problem, who has it? This is how we, air quote, narrow our niche. So understanding the group of people who are actively experiencing the problem that you help people solve, actively experiencing to the point where they are actively seeking a solution. What we want to understand about this group of people are what is going through their mind? What are they thinking about? How are they feeling? What's keeping them up at night? What are they worried about? What are they fearful of? What are they wanting? What are they desiring? Why can't they seem to figure this out themselves, especially in a world where quite literally anything you want to learn or understand can be found somewhere on the internet for free?
Yeah, so true.
So
why you? Why
aren't you solving it? If we're in an age of information and solutions being available everywhere, why aren't you actually taking action on resolving that issue for yourself? You have to understand that about your client in order for you to understand how to actually get their attention first and foremost, but more so to understand how to actually go about developing the solution. And this is very important for service-based businesses, because often when I ask entrepreneurs, what's the problem you help people solve, they usually respond to me with, I help people do this. And then I always say, that's not what I asked you. I
Right.
asked you, what is the problem that people are actively experiencing that you have the solution for? Without understanding the problem, how could we, if we really think about it, how could we effectively create a product or service that's going to solve that problem? So sometimes people can go flying into entrepreneurship thinking, I want to do this and I want to build a course and I want to host a retreat and I want to have a mastermind and I want to do these things and I want to do workshops because I love doing these things. It's like, yes, that's great. But do you fundamentally understand the group of people that will be before you and how to actually enable them to walk themselves through the process to lead them towards the solution? So we have to understand the problem. We have to understand the group of people who have the problem. And then to take it a final step further, understanding what is it about this larger target market of people that are actively experiencing this problem that you deeply desire to work with. And I'm a huge believer that this day and age, we get to absolutely create the type of work experience we get to have too. And so I think it is, and I probably get pushback for this, but I think it is a little bit of an old school mindset to think that we're at the mercy of anyone who is simply willing to pay us money. And a customer is a customer, a client is a client. Some people do operate their businesses that way. For me personally, I love to feel deeply connected to the people that I'm working with. And so understanding what are the non-negotiable traits or characteristics or values that I need to see within that target market, the people within that target market, in order to qualify them to be able to work with me.
What would that sound like or look like?
For people, it could be value systems. It could be people who, let's just say someone's starting a parenting membership of some sort. And so a deep sense of family, solid relationships in their lives, a willingness to have hard and uncomfortable conversations with their loved ones. For other people, it could be a little bit more on the polarizing thing, which is unfortunately becoming increasingly more relevant in today's age, where do you share the same political beliefs and ideologies as me in order for this working relationship to actually be good for both of us? That's a real issue right now.
You see a lot of that residue.
Absolutely.
You know, where people feel ostracized and people feel on the other side uncomfortable or not considered. So both have this like, well, then I'm just never going to ever consider, and I blame you for everything, and I blame you for everything, which is like our job is not to convince people to be different. You know, I just think it's like it becomes the same exclusionary experience, you know.
It's bizarre. And, you know, with my community, it would be odd if someone who was not of the same ideologies for how I currently see our world and the problems that I believe are very, very prevalent for us. It would be odd for a person that isn't on the same page with those critical things to end up in my community.
To be drawn to it. Yeah. Same.
And it probably wouldn't make them feel very safe, even though I am a safe person and there would be no harm caused in the way that we think about harm. But it would probably be the same if I was in the reverse, where if all of a sudden there was a community of people who hated, more conservative thinking women and who made different medical choices. I don't know how I would feel in an environment where there wasn't another one of those people like me in that space. So it's an unfortunate reality in a polarized world. So, understanding what really matters to you and where are you going to feel the safest yourself? Where are you going to feel the most expressed, fully able to be yourself and expand into all that makes you you? If you can't do that with your clients, then I would challenge what is going on there within yourself to make you feel as though you're not safe to be seen, that if there is a fear there, if I let people know who I really am, then I'm going to lose my money or I'm not going to fill this course, which really...
It happens these days, right?
It does. It really does.
But I'd rather lose the misaligned,
Well, that's liberation.
Right. I think this is just, as you said, become so much more prevalent in the last In the States, this really became to be prevalent in, I think it was 2016, the election.
Yes.
I saw it as someone who visited the States a lot. My wife's American. But I didn't live it. I didn't know it. I think everyone was so caught off guard when Trump won the election. And then that just led to more divisive rhetoric about people who are Republican
Right.
and what that means, and versus now the perspectives about people like Joe Biden or Justin Trudeau versus Pierre Poilievre. Is that the way you say his last name? Poilievre. Whatever. Poilievre. But the way that we perceive these political and ideological and wings, that there seems to be an inability to be with people who, like, for example, I have a family member who's a farmer. I didn't agree with a lot of the stuff he said growing up. I felt like I was, in a way, like an island in Calgary of some liberal thoughts, and then I moved to Vancouver, and then any conservative thought felt like I was an island, you know?
Yes.
And now I feel like what seems to be the most self-silenced are the people who are more left-leaning, who now, and I might be projecting, but this has been my experience, is that people who are more left-leaning, who don't identify with the level of intolerance that exists on the furthest ends of the left. Mm-hmm. And that if you do not believe in these things that we've discussed a little bit, like that if you criticize any of these ideologies, you're instantly right-wing. Mm-hmm. So there's not an ideological. So I think for the people who have felt a sense of exile and an intolerance to diverse thought, which is not phobia or hate or all that stuff that it gets lumped into. It can be, but 99% of the time it is not. What happens is they don't feel psychologically safe, so they're not going to want to participate in groups, you know, that don't allow for flexible thinking. Mm-hmm. Which that's why I think you see this rise of, if a party right now created a centrism, you know, like, hey, we don't believe in these wings, we believe in open dialogue and social liberal programs, and we believe in fiscal conservatism. Oh, shit.
Yeah, what a unicorn.
Right. Which I think, you know, I'm sure everyone has different perspectives, of course, but I feel like Robert Kennedy Jr. kind of represents some of that.
I would agree.
Yeah. And I don't know, I think the conservatives in Canada are really more a centrist party.
Yes.
You know, it's just that everything that's not liberal NDP is right wing.
Far right.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just shows like it's really interesting how that has shifted ideologically, not literally.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And it has become a factor in digital entrepreneurship. And so,
yeah, like I don't want to be in connection with people who aren't open-minded in some way,
right.
You know, and I don't want to be in groups of people that don't respect diverse thought.
Right.
You know, and like I don't care what someone believes politically. I'd actually like to understand why you like some of
that would be like
people.
Me too. Help me understand.
Yeah, because like I actually can. It's so obvious why someone doesn't like Trump. I get it. He's explicitly not a very pleasant. He's not a generally charismatic. He's pretty rough around the edges. He's belligerent, right? And I get why people think that Joe Biden's incompetent. Yes. I mean, the poor guy should be hanging out with his grandkids. Mm-hmm. You know, and I get why people dislike Justin Trudeau, and I also get why people dislike Pierre, right? Like, I understand that because, to me, those are all understandable perspectives. Yeah. But I think it's interesting when our perspective doesn't include the understanding of, it's like when I was telling a very close friend of mine, I really respect your perspective about getting the jab. Like, I love that for you, that you get as many as you want. Like, I respect that. He was like, I don't respect your perspective. I'm like, okay. Like,
and these are the strange times that we're in, right? And so what I've found is the people who are having a unnecessarily difficult experience in their business right now, let's just say, it's usually due to a hesitance to fully be seen, especially when they don't believe that they will be accepted based on what we see as a popular opinion of people who they may share the same or different thought from.
Yeah.
And so it's, how could this not bleed into a person's entrepreneurial
I relate to that
experience? I mean, it's just the reality that we're in. So being courageous to say, listen, In order for me to have the best experience as an entrepreneur and for the working relationship between myself and my client to be mutually, we have mutual respect, feel safe for both parties, feel open, then this is the criteria of the market that I am looking at from a non-negotiable standpoint in order for me to also be fully expressed, not just working with my clients, but also in a public way so that these people know that I am who they are, or they're who I'm here for. And so it's going to depend business owner to business owner what those non-negotiable factors are. But the difference between working with your ideal client and just your general target market of people who are willing to pay you money because they have the problem, night and day. And I believe that this is a factor in the new way that we get to do business is really actually enjoying the people that we work with. And it's possible that a couple of years from now, those factors will shift for you and your brand will have to pivot, and that's okay too. New information creates new beliefs, new worldviews, value systems may be rooted in, value systems may become upheaved, and all of a sudden something's more important and you're allowed to continue to shift. And that brings is into fundamental number 3, which is branding. But just to quickly tie up on number 2, which is the thing you're selling.
Right.
You have to know, number 1, you have to know who your person is, the problem they experience, et cetera, in order to be able to responsibly create a solution to the problem that you are going to take to market. We have to make sure that we have our credibility in what we are creating by doing our due diligence to understand the person that we are going to be actively selling to. But fundamental number 3 is your brand. And this is where we've seen a lot of tragedy over the last few years I refer to it as being imprisoned within the confines of this 2-dimensional screen that advertises you as a person in your business. And cancel culture has played a significant role in the fears that people have around really allowing authenticity to take the lead in their personal brand. Authenticity, I think, has become more of a buzzword than something that's actually
like an embodied being
in practice.
Yeah.
Because there's fear that if they don't curate themselves or their dialogue, their speech, the things that they choose to talk about, regardless of what their heart is begging them to say, then cancel culture continues to have a grip on us. We continue to play by the rules of someone else's standards, which means that if we're going to block ourselves in our ability to create a brand and be fully expressed in who we are, be fully expressed in how we want to communicate to our ideal clients, what is the experience of ourselves as a business owner going to become if we can't do these things? So there's a theme that goes through each of these fundamentals of liberation, expression, authenticity, allowing yourself to simply be the human being behind the business instead of having to shapeshift and morph and chameleon yourself into this other version so that you become more attractive or more accepted by people who are placing conditions on you. So liberation to me in business is a non-negotiable. I can't, I've been there. I've been imprisoned by my brand. I have built a business in which I have surrounded myself with people who I didn't end up feeling safe with, to be able to speak my own truth. And again, going back to the contrast we were talking about earlier in the conversation, I had to experience the contrast of what it feels like to feel like I'm being gagged in my own space, in my own creation.
It's amazing. We recreate our family systems in our businesses.
And I recreated, corporate hell where there was all these rules and you can't do this and you can't say that. Otherwise you're going to end up in HR's office. And it's just like, how? And it happens so subconsciously.
Isn't that wild? Like we just subtly are not self-expressed or subtly codependent.
Yeah.
Like I remember having this epiphany within my own business where I was like afraid to let someone go and hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was in exactly like every relational dynamic, my childhood, and they were more of an outspoken, bulldozy kind of personality. And my predisposition was to be more doormatty. So it was like a perfect,
Just come walk all over me.
it's like, oh, I love our wounds in my workplace, right? But now the accountability is, it's not optional. I'm the leader. Like I'm the leader of my own experience, and that's true of every area of my life. Like the responsibility is mine to take the route of the adult.
Yes.
It's crazy that what you were saying about business and liberation and authenticity, I think there's this really powerful moment we're in from a social media perspective that if you are someone who abandons and erases yourself for belonging, then social media is actually the perfect place to work on that. Because first off, you're not somatically, your body, your nervous system is not designed to hold the opinion of 5,000 people, let alone 1 million people.
Yeah.
So welcome to the gym, because that, and I recognize too, like in what you're saying, I recognize so much in my own experience of building a prison of a brand, building a prison of self-expression, where it was formerly super 100% authentic self-expression. But then when safety starts to be in there, and psychological safety and ideological safety and just like feeling psychologically okay, that I'm not going to be abused or attacked or shamed.
It's very real.
Yeah, like, it's...
And I understand why people have that reservation, because if you believe that if you allow yourself to simply be yourself, that as a result, something bad is going to happen, I can understand why people try and play it safe. But
Well, the evidence is there. You look in Canada, we might minimize, regardless of your political perception, you might actually be supportive of the freezing of bank accounts of
Right.
people who donated to, at the time, we could argue whether it was legal or not. I don't care about that because it's not particular to the point, which is that at the time of donation, the trucker convoy was legal.
yes,
So that means that those who donated, who could just be someone chilling in Kelowna, or something, who's like, oh, wow, like this, I really stand for what they stand for. Again, it's like it was legal. But then to be chilling in your room and all of a sudden have your bank account frozen, for a regular Canadian, I know Americans looked at this and went like, holy crap. And the world, because that was such a disruption of economic safety is psychological safety, so many investors pulled out of Canada, which is one of the large reasons that they stopped the Emergencies Act. But what's really interesting is that I don't care whether you supported it or not. I mean, I do care on a fundamental human rights level. But to me, what's even more important is that recognizing that unconsciously, if they can freeze a bank account because of a misalignment of political alignment, of political perspective, of supporting a movement, they might have happened to do it to one that you didn't like either. But if they can do it about one that exists that you don't like, they could do it just as easily about one that you are supportive of. So if you support the freezing of people's rights for one thing, you support it for everything.
For all.
So on a deep, fundamental, psychological level, Canada is now fractured.
yes,
And I do not say this lightly, and Canadians don't even know. They're walking around being like, everything's fine. Like, oh, now the court said that was illegal. Like, it's fine. It's not fine because it's like watching someone in your family be abused or be financially abused. And then see that if you witness your mother be financially abused by your father, it will 100% impact you and your relationship to money growing up. And if your opinion means the possible loss of your psychological safety and your literal safety, then you will not share your opinion. And Canadians don't get that even though it might have been the thing they wanted, on a deep subconscious level, they know that it might eventually be something that happens to them.
and that is exactly why, when it comes to authenticity in our brands, for me, And I know that this won't be true for everybody that's running a personal brand, even if they do share the perspective that I have. But for me, it's a responsibility to use my voice because of exactly what you just said. There was a discrete weaponization of our ability to use our voice. And
It sends a message.
it sends a very clear message, which is why, on the coattails of 2020, when cancel culture was at its peak, and there was a lot of division and upheaval, and you're right, you're wrong, and there was an intensity that was brewing. There were things that got really heated in the digital world right before the public health crisis that really came to a roaring head in Canada in 2021 that clearly sent a message, whether unconsciously or not, that it was unsafe for you to speak. And so we were primed in 2021 to be very silent because there was a very obvious risk that we were all well aware of, that if we were to speak against a popular narrative or the accepted narrative, I should say, then we were at risk. And in the context of entrepreneurship, a direct risk to a person's livelihood.
Yeah, we'll take it, right? That's the message that's sent. We'll take everything.
Exactly. And so I understand why there is such massive hesitation to really allow yourself to expand in your brand, regardless of what side of what fence you fall on whatever topic there is. People are terrified to just be true to themselves. And so if we're not considering how that's playing out in how our business is operating, it will bleed into every facet of your business, from your brand to the people that you're attracting into your brand, to the experience that they have with you when experiencing your paid service or transacting with you with your product. It bleeds into fourth fundamental, which is marketing. If we're marketing to a group of people that we're playing it very safe with, and we're not focusing on that ideal client in our larger target market, we're literally going out there and saying, I would like you to come over here, even though I understand that you probably fundamentally do not accept me for who I am. But I want your attention because I need numbers. Business is a numbers game. I need more followers. I need more clicks. I need more stats. I need more whatever, opt-ins. And we just go out there, and if we just haphazardly market for the sake of chasing metrics as opposed to creating a better experience for ourselves, which in turn creates a better experience and a greater likelihood for a positive outcome for the people who are paying us, then we're bringing the wrong people into our space.
That's beautiful, because I think of how codependency leaks itself into entrepreneurship. And, I was working with this client who desired to, you could tell she on some level resented her clients because she wasn't charging enough. Mm-hmm. And, I've worked with lots of people on this one principle because I've lived it, is that, and that's why I think so much of the construction of the understanding the archetype is the construction of understanding your former self who struggled with a problem that you then figured out how to solve. And now you can create the product or the service that solves the similar problem you walked yourself through. And now you've got a service, and I remember reflecting to her that if you are not charging enough for the exchange of the value of your time, then you're not able to fully be present in the experience, because you're going to resent them, which means that you're creating a codependent exchange, which is not a free relationship, which is not liberating. And so it's actually in service of the person that you charge the right amount for the time. And it only makes sense that the more experience you have, the one session with you might be equivalent to 20 sessions with someone else. So it is actually worth the investment for the transformation. And it's so interesting how entrepreneurship really brings forward these unhealed, unresolved things, which is, again, amplified through social media, amplified through a lack of safety. I remember in the book 10X is Easier than 2X with Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan, he talks about how it's easier to get one client with a $10 million house than as a realtor than 20 clients with a $500,000 house in terms of time invested. And the experience of the client goes way up, and so does your experience. What you're arguing for or suggesting, which I think is incredible, is that when it's aligned, it's expansive. When it's aligned, it's nourishing for everybody. But when it's forced, it's not, because even the experience of the product, of the person buying the product, is there is a lack of nourishment for them because it's sold or marketed from a place of scarcity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're not getting the fully expressed you. They're not getting the fully present you, like you just said. They're not getting the liberated you. So how could you, especially as a service-based business provider, how could you say you are providing the best service to your clients if you're not able to be any of those things fully liberated, expressed, present? And so the alignment is non-negotiable. What we need more of is the courage to actually admit who the heck we want to work with, and then
and who we are.
And who we are.
Yeah.
And that's how they end up attracted into our spaces, because this is just who I am. They're like, oh man, it's so refreshing. Okay, good. Someone shares a thought as me, or wow, she's really courageous. Whatever it is that is drawing them into your space, that does provide them with the best possible service that you could create. So why wouldn't we do whatever we could in order to be the person who can do that? And so when it comes to marketing, which the way that I describe the difference between branding and marketing, because this can be a point of confusion for people. And I just flew out here today and watching the dudes on the runway with the red lights, right? Waving the plane in, saying land here, land here, land here. That's marketing. It's like getting the attention of something to come and land in your space. Yeah. Where that plane lands is your brand. So then people get out of the plane.
Like what the airport is, you mean?
Yeah.
Or the gate?
Yeah, the gate where they land, the city that the plane lands in. Yeah. They're like, oh, do I like it here? I came here. Yeah. Do I like what I see? Is this what I thought it was? Is this, I don't know.
Is it Prince George? Is it, I don't know.
Right?
I've landed in Prince George. I wasn't blown away. But it is beautiful countryside. Mountains. So. No offense, Prince George, I love you.
Yeah, no offense. The marketing, the branding, the service, the person, you, the thread has to be tight with all of those things, because if you're out there flailing around trying to get people's attention with your marketing, but it's not actually speaking to your ideal client, you're bringing in the wrong people, or you're misleading them with your marketing. And then when they come and click on the profile, they're like, oh, I loved this reel. Who's this person? They go, whoa, that's not who I thought this person was. And I've seen so many of my close friends over the last few years blow up because they've had these reels that have gone bananas, and then they come in, they're like, yeah, this is the best person that I've ever followed. And then all of a sudden they share a little bit more about themselves. They're like, oh, how dare you? I can't believe you think this way. It's like, who did you think you were landing on? Right? So all of this, there has to be such a tight level of cohesiveness between these fundamentals, and which leads us to the last one, fundamental number 5, which is your sales. And the whole ideology behind this is that if you execute 1 to 4 from a place of truth, 5 will take care of itself. 5 no longer has to be something where we go out and chase.
It's not selling, it's being.
It's just being.
It's like a natural magnetism.
It's just a natural thing that occurs with ease. And so the reason why I said earlier is that once you understand the fundamentals of business, when something's not working right in your business, you can say, which one of these has come off track? Is it my brand that's disjointed? Do I need to dial that back in again? Have I fallen off track? Have I just simply forgotten who I'm speaking to? Am I disconnected from my ideal client? Have I shifted? Is there something about me that has grown or evolved and changed that is now making me feel different about the original people that I was working with? Do we need to reassess that? And so it just makes for a very easy, almost like dashboard for you to refer to at any stage of your business, whether you're brand new or 20 years in, whether you're starting a brand new stream of income or trying to revitalize one that has stopped working for some reason. you come back to these 5 fundamentals every single time and figure out which one's not working properly and just dial it. I see too many entrepreneurs launch something, it doesn't go according to plan, so they scrap the whole thing. It's like, well, hold on a second. There could have just been one area, one of these fundamentals, maybe 2, where if you had to just really critically looked and been critically honest with yourself about how you're showing up, especially as a personal brand, how you're showing up, you'll probably find that it's just 1, maybe 2 degrees off. And if you just allow yourself to shift, which usually requires a little bit of courage, because usually it's because people are holding back just a little too much. And they're not allowing themselves to be fully seen, which is absolutely going to compromise your ability to be magnetic. Law of attraction is really not going to be on your side.
Yeah.
If
law
you're hiding.
of repelling.
Yeah, law of friction, I think, is what ends up happening. But that's really it. That's how I support business owners. But I think the exacerbation of everything that has occurred in the last few years is what has made me so deeply rooted in how I do this with people, because it does all come back to your truth and who you are, and are you courageous enough to allow that to be seen?
Well, the context is so important.
Yeah.
Because I think if we don't understand what's going on a deep unconscious level, and we wonder, why am I anxious? Why do I have such a hard time starting a business? Why am I not self-expressing? Why do I feel like I can't be myself when I don't have some sort of controversial? The view is not what would be known as controversial. It's just a perspective, but then we see that in a culture that currently actually operates with a giant level of intolerance masquerading as openness, it makes sense that people are quiet. And I think, as coming back to the real original sort of opening of how you open this, is that it's a revolutionary act to step into this level of ownership, honesty, truth, purpose, diversification. Like, this is the frickin' work, man.
This is the work.
This is the work. And someone who has that level of expanded capacity to be is the most healing thing to a family, a relationship, a community, a culture, and a world. And you've been that magnifying glass for me, that magnet for me, and I love the way that you live and orient to the world and lead, because you've really lived that as a fundamental truth for yourself in how you embody your brand. And I've also witnessed you inspire like thousands. And I had the honor of speaking at your last conference, Monetize Your Mind, the program that was in Kananaskis, and I know you have another one upcoming at the end of May, which I'm excited to get to speak at again.
Round 2.
Yeah, and so for everyone listening, where can they get more of Sarah Swain? Where can they find out more about Monetize Your Mind?
Thank you for this conversation, first off, because I could talk about this stuff all day.
Yeah, me too.
And it just to tie up the whole conversation, the example we set as entrepreneurs, this is the most well that we could be, is when we do this type of work on ourselves, and we're happy, and we're
we get paid,
and we get paid, and we're taken care of, and we're safe, and we feel secure. We source that security from within ourselves. Like, how could that not be the best example of what entrepreneurship gets to be for the next generation that's watching us? And how many doors does that open up for new people that would start thinking about entrepreneurship that may not have otherwise done so? So thank you for this conversation. Where can people find more information? Easiest place to follow me is on Instagram at I am Sarah Swain. Anything and everything goes on that platform, which is part of my brand magic. And anything to do with Monetize Your Mind itself is monetizeyourmind.ca.
Perfect.
And you're speaking at the conference again in the end of May. You were an easy choice for me to invite back to the stage. So thank you for coming back for round 2.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And the community of people, that was exceptional. Like, I'm always reminded when I'm at conferences, just how that's ultimate. Like, it doesn't matter how many followers a person has. What people want is to be in an actual literal space with people, seeing that they're not crazy, that actually, like, sitting down with people with diverse views rehumanizes them. And then we're like, oh, we're not keyboard warriors, we're lovers. Well, thank you for what you create and appreciate you coming out for this conversation.
Thanks, Mark.